Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today we are reading His Reasons. It's a Todoroki X-Rater listener fanfic by AshleyH713. Today we are reading Season 4, Chapter 12. I would like to read Chapter 13 as well, but I doubt that's gonna happen. I couldn't find a better cup, so I'm still probably gonna spill water several times while filming this. That's it. Let's get on with reading. A couple hours later, the door to Amari's cage was slammed open with a dozen Yakuza members. And a dozen of Yakuza members hoisted the girl to her feet, not really caring if they were gentle or not. The time had come, and Bakugo was slightly nervous for what she had willingly signed up for. She talked a big game to Endeavor, but inside, the girl was terrified. She was miles away from any ally or hero, so if anything went south, she would ultimately be screwed. There was so much pressure here, and Amari was scared to mess even one thing up. One of the men roughly grabbed her upper arm as they pushed her out the door, and in doing so, she called back to Endeavor so they would know she was on the move. Hey, be careful, jerks. You don't have to push me. The hero seemed to get the message as he narrowed his eyes towards the microphone. An intense glare now present, he understood the importance of this plan just as well. Focus, Bakugo. This is it. Mari nodded internally as one of the men pushed her aggressively towards the door before grabbing her again on both sides of her tight arm. Let's go, the boss is expecting you. She frowned as they began to walk together down the long interior hallway. The majority of the area was silver and gray like a laboratory, although that made sense considering that what they were doing too airy down here. Just the idea made Amari furious already. Rounding a corner, Bakugo inspected each of the doors to her carefully, but finding nothing out of the ordinary. They all seemed to be the same metal door as her own. She then looked to her left and found one door propped open enough for the girl to see inside. There seemed to be a large white operating chair in the center with a variety of terrible tools. I almost dropped my water. Lining the table next to it. The sight almost made her throw up. What had Jisaki done to this girl? Of course she knew, to an extent, but looking at it, it seemed far worse than what Amari had originally imagined. Swallowing back, Amari then caught the eye of another closed metal door in the far right corner. Except this time there was a multitude of guards blocking the entrance. It was like there was something important in there. Or someone. What the hell? She turned around to get a closer look when the guards grabbed her arms in anger, pulling her back from the area in a single motion. They really didn't want her to go near that door. Maybe, just maybe, Eri was in there. What do you think you're doing? This way, kid. They pushed her down the opposite direction, but Amari couldn't help but look back, now seeing a man enter the room in question with a small cup of pills in his hand and some food. That confirmed it for her. Eri must have been in that room. What else? Why else would it be heavily guarded with medicine and food? She did it. She found her. Well, possibly. Although it was short-lived, as the Yakuza pushed her back again, this time with a little more frustration, so much so that they stepped on the chain binding her ankles, and Amari yelped as she tumbled to the floor. Quit fooling around, the boss is going to be angry. She groaned as her elbows hit the hard ground, only to be hoisted back up and led into a room with two huge double doors attached to them. Blinking at the sudden light, she found Jisaki with his arms crossed in the center of the empty space. There you are. Are you ready to put on a show? He then pointed to a dozen cameras lining the edge of the space that all had flashing lights attached to them. This bastard was going to film her fight as proof. How slimy. I thought it would just be us. I'm not really into having an audience. This only made Jisaki smirk, though, shrugging his shoulders. This is just so I can show the interested parties what All for One's pet can really do. That is, if you survive. He was playing with her, trying to instill doubt, but Amari wasn't about to let him, only replying back plainly. I already told you, I'm not that man's damn pet. Chisaki didn't seem intimidated, though, only snapping his fingers as the men next to you pushed a button on a wall on a small remote, and Amari's restraints were unlocked, allowing her to move freely. We'll see about that. Looking down, she still found the cuffs firmly attached to her wrists, but the connection had been broken. They must have had some kind of metal sensor to them. She didn't know why, but Amari had a feeling that if she tried to attack him now, it wouldn't be successful. I don't know if that was a smart thing to do. What if I decide to attack you? The man gave her a knowing look, now pointing to the metal cuffs around her wrists and ankles. Oh, I know you aren't that foolish. Besides, those quirk suppressors are still on, just in case you decide to misbehave. My men can turn them back on whenever they see fit, so trying to double-cross me would be a bad idea. But you already figured that out, didn't you? She did, in fact. Now looking at the cuffs with disdain, the man could control her quirk like this. The first thing she had to do was figure out a way to get them off, so his dog collar on her would be gone. But how? That was the question. That is the question. Overhaul took in her silent expression for a moment before speaking out again, this time with slight amusement. You said you wanted to show me how tough you are? Well, now's your chance. You may begin whenever. Yeah. And don't worry about making a mess. They are disposable. Just then the doors to the left opened, and 30 large accused men surrounded the small girl. As her eyes widened, he wanted her to fight 30 trained men with different unknown quirks. It was a losing battle already. And 30-1? Her odds were basically impossible. Feeling the heat in her palms, Amari surveyed the empty area before taking in a large breath. If Katsuki were here, he'd barrel head first into these guys, no problem. If only she was him. Chisaki lifted his hand, and almost immediately all the men ran straight towards her all at once, causing the girl to silently panic. Now was not the idea to weigh the impossible odds. She needed to get through this for Endeavor, for Sir Night-Eye's agency, for Eri, and for herself. The bodies jumped up in the air, and Amari had just enough time to put up a medium-sized golden shield. She then successfully threw the man away from her as the top of the dome burned their chests all at once. As they groaned on the floor, Amari didn't even have time to think as another man hit her in the back of the spine, causing the girl to turn around before using her gold matter to grab his arm roughly before he yelped out in pain, punching his stomach with force. The man came tumbling down as another took his place. Her breathing began to become shallow, and Bakugo knew she had to pace herself, but found it hard, and Chisaki's men wouldn't even give her a moment to rest. She would just have to work with what she had, and be careful of her condition at the same time. Because she was thinking about her breathing, another presence appeared as she whipped around to confront it, but her movements were too slow, and the enemy took advantage, now using a squirt to crack the floor underneath them and throw large, massive rocks in her direction. Murray gasped and put up a shield just in time, though the effect sent her back a few feet. Now falling to the floor from impact. This really was impossible. She was just too outnumbered to fight them all. She stumbled to her feet as someone was waiting for her. And Amari quickly put her hand up to let off a large explosion before they could reach her as she wiped a bit of blood from her mouth. Yet another Yakuza member was ready, though, barreling towards her with hot fire breath as Amari threw another explosion to hide her body in a smoke screen and took something from his pocket unnoticed. Once the area cleared, her attacker looked around in a confused state, only to have the girl appear behind him as she used her explosions to propel her into the air before kicking the man in the face. Gazing around wildly, Amari then looked down at her cuffs before coming up with a plan. Now seeing another Yakuza member race forward with intent. Amari watched his fist come down before they could connect. She lifted up her wrist only for the man to forcibly punch her cuff with his acid quirk, causing the girl to fall towards the ground. The acid dripping onto her hand, and the girl gritted her teeth at the action just a little more. Her heart screamed in pain when suddenly a gust of wind picked up her body and threw her against the wall. Small wisps cut at her face and chest as Amari put her hands in front of her again, trying to block the hits with her wrists. Must have been another quirk. Feeling a hard thud, Amari came down with a blurry vision, and another figure appeared above her. Her eyesight was hazy and doubled, so the girl instead took blind faith and shoved her hands into some part of his skin before letting off an explosion extreme close. The man screamed in horror as sharp drops of liquid splattered on her face, and all of her other opponents paused for a moment. Mari blinked away, her blurry vision in confusion haze, and caught the sight of Crimson before her, her enemy before her, now clutching his face as blood poured from some unknown place as she noticed singed masks littering the corner as he cursed. Mari stood there in shock, now processing what she had done. She had permanently scarred this man with her explosions. Any closer to his brain, she would have killed him. With a slight shake to her hand, she suddenly heard Chisaki call out to her from the darkness of the music. Go on, and finish him. I already said they were disposable. Shaking her head in disapproval, Mari replied, Are you serious? No, I am not a murderer. I don't kill people like you, Chisaki. I refuse. Yet his voice returned a moment later, stopping the girl in his tracks as his thick, cruel voice filled her ears with his words. Why? It didn't stop you before. Mari's eyes widened with confusion at his statement when suddenly her mind became blurry as the room spun in 1,000 different directions. She felt the words in her brain from a past memory of conversation crash into her all at once. Go ahead, little one. Follow my orders and finish them. Feeling her breathing pick up, she tried to shake the memory away, but found it impossible, now muttering back to no one in particular. No, not now. Please, not now. Mari then vaguely heard Endeavor's voice through her earpiece, and she put her hand up to stop the noise, almost forgetting the communication was supposed to be secret. Bakugo, it's not real, remember? Don't let it distract you. She slammed her hands over her ears to drown out the fragment of memories as flashes entered her mind once again. The floor around her turned crimson, and a sick sensation smashed into her brain, making her want to throw up all at once. There was blood everywhere now, lining the walls and her hands as well as her costume. She tried to tell herself it wasn't real, but the emotions that came with it felt like they were tearing her apart. Why wouldn't all of this just go away? Stop it, please, stop it. Endeavor's voice entered again, except this time it felt extremely far away. Bakugo! Falling to the ground to her knees, Amari shook her head aggressively as the girl felt like she was being drowned. Her breath gasped for air, and she vaguely heard Chisaki's voice through her muffled ear. What are you waiting for? Go on. She vaguely felt the Yakuza approach, and 1,000 alarm bells rang in her mind. Yes, they were villains, but she was scared of herself right now. It was her power. It was like her power was leaking out, and Amari was afraid of seriously killing these men. It didn't matter if they were Chisaki. They were still human. They were with Chisaki. They were still human. Finding her voice for a moment, Amari brokenly called out to her attackers in hopes that they would change their minds quickly. Oh, wait! Stay away from me! I can't! But of course they didn't listen, still approached with anger, which angered and terrified the girl. Now feeling a low growl in her stomach, it didn't sound human in the slightest. One of the men then grabbed her shoulder, and Amari's body reacted immediately, now throwing golden spikes of matter in the direction of her attacker without thinking. This was bad. She had to get away from here. Feeling her feet move towards the double door she came from, suddenly another body was blocking her way, and her instincts took her to move him as the voice entered her mind again. Is that all you can do, little one? Don't be such a coward. She didn't want to fight, but before she could even process, Mari's quirk had ignited itself like she had no choice, and barreling into the largely built man with a growl. Stop it! I'm not a coward! I hate reading these parts because it's sad. Her gold matter slashes his chest before he swung back. But Bakugo was faster. This time her hand slammed into his shoulder, now burning his jacket and skin. Then, once he was on his knees, the girl slammed her quirk into the man's face as he cowered away in pain. There was more crimson now, more liquid lining the area, but this time she didn't care, only thinking about the enemies to her left and right. It was like she had this instinct, this need to take them down for some reason, to show them who she was. Her mind was only focused on one thing, ending them. Then for a moment her mind blinked clarity as she lowered her hands, only for her voice to return once more. You want to give up? Then you are a failure. just like all the others before you. Perhaps your brother was right after all. Shaking her head in frustration, the girl felt some invisible force on her neck shock her into continuing. As she raised her hands again, Mari screamed back to no one in particular as she raced towards the men and her enemies with the intent. Shut up! Just shut the fuck up! Get out of my head! Someone hit her in the back of the head, but Bakugo didn't feel any pain from it, only turning around and grabbing the man's arm tightly. Then, before she could process it, she bent the limb backwards. Ooh. And a sickening crack echoed through the space, breaking it in two. All for One's voice. Then, coaxing her hazy mind all at once. You should stop thinking you're human. I've made you better than that, little one. I've made you a weapon. The sheer power of her strength surprised Chisaki, now watching the man scream in pain at the break. A small girl like herself would have never been strong enough to break bones normally. But All for One's creation, well, that was a different story. It seemed Mari realized that as well before she stared at the man. In excruciating pain, her mind suddenly beginning to clear and register what actually happened. She didn't just break that man's arm, right? Looking forward in confusion, she found her costume littered with blood as well as some on her hands from the aftermath. That's when the panic seeped in. What? Just then, all of her muscles tensed up immediately, causing the girl to crumble to the floor while clutching her heart painfully. Her breathing was only allowed in small, quick gasps as the girl placed her hands on the floor for support. It felt like her body was ripping in two. She vaguely registered Chisaki's shoes by her head as he towered over her with intent. Ah, yes, now that's exactly what I pictured All for One's pet to be like. Gritting her teeth in agony, the villain then rolled her over with his shoe before shaking his head. It would be a shame if you died right here. I'm sure the police price for you will be very high indeed. Thank you for the demonstration. Mari frowned at his words, only for the men to push a button on the remote and the girl's quirk was cut off. She was back where she started, bound together with her wrist and ankles. That will be all. Send her back. The Yakuza complied, now lifting the girl by her forearms before she hazily felt herself being dropped in her usual cell, the door shutting almost immediately. Groaning at the pain in her muscles, Endeavor's voice cut through everything else. She didn't know why, but he sounded on edge. Bakugo, answer me. She tried to sit up, but found another wave of dizziness as she muttered, Endeavor. Sighing to himself, the man called back roughly, What were you thinking? I told you this plan was foolish, and you almost jeopardized the entire mission. Maria tried to listen, but she could only think back to that fight, that feeling she had with it. It reminded her so much of her confrontation with All for One, and it terrified her. I thought it was over. Endeavor paused at that. What? Shaking her head in denial, Mari's voice cracked back, a little bit louder this time. I thought it was over. I stopped taking the pills, so I should be normal. What happened? What did he do to me? Endeavor. I'm scared. Oh, I'm gonna cry. She sounded so fragile, so vulnerable, like something really scared her. Sir Nayadai listened with his eyes cast down, remembering that she was still indeed a 15-year-old child. Maybe it was wrong to send her. The line was silent for a moment before Mari lifted her knees to her chest in a small attempt of comfort. She really needed her brother, or Shoto right now. Just someone to hold her and tell her she wasn't a monster. That what she just did in that fight wasn't really her. Listen, Endeavor, I know you aren't good at comforting, or literally anything remotely positive. Please, tell me I'm not a monster. I really need to hear that right now. I'm gonna cry. She closed her eyes as she willed the memory away, and sighed to herself, knowing that Todoroki's father would never be comforting like that. She just needed to get over this and focus on the mission, although Mari stopped when Endeavor's voice entered her ear, slow and small. You're not a monster. You're a hero. Lifting her head up, the girl narrowed her eyes in confusion as she felt her voice crack back. Did he really just say that to her? What? A line was silent for a moment before Todoroki's father answered. I wouldn't have agreed to personally train you if I didn't see your potential. I don't train monsters, I train heroes. She felt her eyes lined with tears, but quickly blinked them away, not wanting Chisaki to know she was showing her weakness as he continued. There's a reason we send you to find the child's location. This is something only you can do. So you are going to sit on the floor and give... So are you going to sit on the floor and give up? Or are you going to save that girl? Lowering her eyes, Amari thought about his words. He was absolutely right. Yes, what had happened was beyond terrifying, but that girl was going through the same thing. She was that kid's hope right now, and there was no way Bakugo was going to give up on her. Never. Amari sat up a bit more before nodding her head to herself, a small smile on her lips now. You're right. Thanks, Endeavor. I really needed to hear that. Just then, Sir Night piped in. As much as this is touching, it seems our plan of finding Aries' location has fallen through. Or did you forget that? Now we have to. Although the girl cut him off almost immediately. I know where she is. This caused the man to freeze before replying. Where? Shaking her head, Amari continued. I can't be certain, but while I was escorted, I saw a door that was heavily guarded. Not only that, I saw a man enter the room with medicine and food in his hand. If I had to bet, I would say Eri is in there. I won't know until I check it out, though. The last part of her sentence caused the number one hero to raise an eye. And how are you going to do that? We are back to square one. Although that's when Amari smiled before pushing her quirk against the metal cuffs for a couple seconds before they sprung apart. The girl looked at the surface and found 2 small cracks in the metal. You said I wouldn't be able to break the cuffs as long as they were in full condition. So during the fight, I made sure the Yakuza aimed their quirks towards them. It took a while, but they finally cracked. She rubbed her wrist as Sir Night-Eye Endeavor stood silently impressed. That girl's strategically took hits to the cuffs so they would become ineffective. It was a smart plan. A really smart plan. Yet that brought up another question as the number one hero voiced it back. And how are you going to get them to let you willingly leave the cell again? Once again, the girl only smiled back before reaching into her black pants pocket and pulling out an employee ID card she took from the fight. Perfect for getting into unauthorized areas. I won't have to. Those Yakuza members have their hands full. They didn't even notice when I pickpocketed them. Endeavor's eyes widened before Sir Night-Eye watched a small smile appear on the hero's face. It was like he was impressed. Not bad, Bakugo. The girl then nodded back in approval before covering the camera with her golden matter and standing up before moving towards the door. She waited until no one was in the hallway before reaching her hands through the bars and sliding the card in on her door for it to open with a slight crack. Now it was time to find Eri. Mari walked down the long hallway before finding a long white doctor's coat draped across an empty chair. She quickly picked up the object and threw it across her shoulder before continuing with her head down to avoid being recognized. Then she moved to the opposite end of the building and found an empty, unused hallway. This was perfect. Taking her hand up, Bakugo let her hands pop with sparks before lifting it up to a nearby sprinkler, causing the object to go off at the heat. She smiled in approval as the building began to beep in warning of a fire, and she heard footsteps start to approach. The area they would be busy with that for a while, which gave her time to check out that door quickly. Alright, set a timer for 15 minutes. That should be more than enough time for them to find... They put out the fire, I said. Huh? Whatever. Sir Night-Eye and Endeavor did as instructed, as Amari then raced down the now empty hallway before finding the door in question with only 2 guards blocking the way. Sighing to herself, Amari then put on her best panicked face before running up to them frantic hurry. What are you 2 doing? There's a fire and the boss said to head over to the East Wing. He's having an emergency meeting right now. The 2 looked at each other before pointing behind them in confusion. What about the girl? Shaking her head, Amari grumbled to herself before quickly showing them the stolen ID for a moment and replying, Are you serious right now? The boss said he wants your heads and you're worried about the girl? You really must have a death wish. One of them started to look nervous as Bakugo pointed away from herself quickly. You know what? Fine. I'll watch the girl while you go to the boss. Your life is more in jeopardy than mine right now. They paused for a minute before finally believing her lie and leaving in a hurry, only for Amari to smirk under her breath. Idiots. Taking her stolen ID card out, Amari then swiped open the door before stepping inside the dark room and shutting the door behind her. She sighed to herself and turned around only for someone to gasp behind her. Amari then turned around and found the very girl she was trying to find. Eri. Who are you? Seeing the girl, she couldn't help but smile. All of the sneaking around and fighting had finally paid off because they had done it. They found Eri. Hey, do you remember me? Amari stepped closer, a little too quickly as the girl backed away in a single motion, causing Bakugo's eyes to fall. She then tried putting her hand up in defense. I'm not here to hurt you. We've met before, remember? Back in the city, you grabbed onto my leg. She stuck a step into the light and the fuck was that? Eri's eyes widened, recalling the girl now and taking a step forward, although that's when she noticed the blood in Amari's clothes and shook while closing her eyes. Narrowing her eyes in confusion, Amari looked down only to gasp. She did suppose this looked bad. Wait, you don't have to worry. This isn't my blood. Oh wait, that probably doesn't help. Here, let me try this. Amari then undid her white doctor's jacket along with her black hero jacket and placed them on the floor so that she was only wearing her golden undershirt. There, it's all gone now. You can open your eyes. Eri complied as Bakugo then dropped to her knees so they were the same height. Is that better? Child nodded back and replied softly, I don't like blood. Mari's eyes fell at that before putting her hand out slowly. Poor girl, what she had seen. It's okay. I don't like it either. Her words seemed to calm Eri, who turned her head as Amari smiled back. I don't think we've been properly introduced yet. It's nice to meet you. My name is Amari, but my hero name is Ember. Your name is Eri, right? She nodded her head back slowly, and Bakugo continued lightly. How cool is that? Both of our names start with an E. It's like we could be sisters, right? Laughing at her own joke, the girl then paused as Eri's small hand wrapped around her pants. It was just like what she did the day they first met. I don't have a family. Mari's heart crumbled then, recalling her own past. Why was this girl so much like her in so many ways? It's okay. For a long time I thought that also, but it doesn't always have to be that way. She chuckled thinking about Katsuki as the blonde-haired girl continued. You'll find your family someday. You just don't know it yet. They're out there. Trust me. Eri looked at her with confusion, not really understanding her words as Mari spoke again. There's more to life than just this room. I'm going to help you figure it out. In fact, you can call me Big Sister. Bakugo beamed in excitement as Eri's eyes fell. I can't leave, though. He's going to get mad at me and hurt more people. I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me. Frowning back, the girl then scooted closer in a soft whisper. Eri, don't you know why I'm here? Do you know why I'm here? She shook her head as Amari continued. I'm here to save you. In just a couple of days, you'll be able to leave this place. I'll take you to all the parks in the neighborhood and the aquarium, and even let you eat as much ice cream as you could want. You just have to hang on, okay? Just a little longer and you'll be free. Gently taking the child's hands, Eri's eyes began to line with tears. Really? I can do all that? Nodding back, Amari smiled as she felt her own tears threaten to spill over. Yeah, of course you can. And you remember that green-haired boy that was with me when we met? He's coming to save you, too. Eri rubbed her eyes to erase the tears as she thought about a life outside of her room. A life without pain or blood. She really wanted to see that. I really want that. Just then the child rose to her feet before digging through her drawers, pulling out a medium-sized piece of paper before showing Amari. Is this him? Looking down at the page, Amari's eyes widened as she saw 4 stick figure drawings, one representing Eri and herself, while the other 2 represented Deku and Mirio with their hero costumes. She remembered them that vividly. It was like she was wishing for them to return. Bakugo felt a tear slip from her eye as she picked up the drawing and smiled before pointing to the green blob. Yeah, that's him. His name is Deku. And the other one's name is Mirio. Eri stared at the page before nodding her head as if to remember them. Deku, Mirio. Smiling in return, Amari replied, Yeah, that's right. Then the white-haired girl got to her feet once more before pulling out another piece of paper along with a handful of markers and handing it to Bakugo. You want to draw? She really wished she could stay. In fact, she wanted to stay here forever, but the girl paused when Endeavor's voice echoed in her ear. Bakugo, time's almost up. Frowning back, Bakugo shook her head before turning to Eri sadly. I'm sorry, Eri, I have to go, but I promise we will draw the next time we see each other, okay? Child looked at the paper with a frown before nodding her head in agreement. Okay. Mari smiled back before rising from the floor and turning to the door. I'll see you soon. Placing a hand on the door handle, Bakugo was then about to open it when Eri tugged on her pant leg once. Wait, take one so that you can color too. She looked down and looked at the small child holding a black marker up to her in question. Amari then carefully took it from out of her hands and placed it in her pocket before patting the surface. Thank you. I'll keep it here so it's safe, okay? Eri nodded back in agreement as Amari waved back. Bye, Eri. And placing her hand on the doorknob, she was about to open it when Eri spoke back, causing the blonde-haired girl to freeze at her words. Bye, Sissy. Widening her eyes, Amari turned back only to feel the tears start to rise up again. She told the kid to call her big sister as a joke to lighten the mood, but she's actually hearing it felt so right. It was like she believed Amari to be family, and the blonde-haired girl fully welcomed that idea, now smiling back. Bye, Eri. I'm crying too, man. Oh, that was a sad chapter. It was cute. Okay. Go follow them. They make good stories. God damn. It's a good story. It was awesome. My throat is dry now. Alright. We have a lot more to get through because we are only on Season 4, Chapter 12, and we've got Season 4, Chapter 30, graduation, the question, promises for a lifetime, too good to be true, and is it okay to move on? Oh, and our reasons. That's like a whole nother, I will have to ask again to read our reasons. It's like a continuation. It's like a book 2. You know what I'm saying? Because this is like, oh hey, and then they'll graduate and go on to be pro heroes. Our reasons is like them older and I assume married, but I guess I wouldn't assume when they're pro heroes and they're, doing amazing things. I've got a lot to get through, and I'm sorry it's taking me so long. Next chapter. Shoto's worried. Shit hits the fan. That is all. That is all. You will hear me in the next video. Bye-bye.